And now we turn to the work of a New York artist, Wally Reinhardt. Thank you for being here with us. And this work is a life work. It's the work of a life, pages from Ovid. It's actually in the museum next to us in the Gray Gallery, of NYU. And we're lucky to have Lucy Oakley as a speaker. She represents art in New York very well through her career, educator, scholar, organizer of countless exhibitions, probably 70 only here, advisor at Columbia, participating to the activity of the Met Museum. So thank you, Lucy. You are going to speak about Reinhardt.
Good afternoon, everyone. The title of my talk today is Made in Manhattan, Wally Reinhardt's Pages from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Made in Manhattan, because that's where Wally was born, raised, and lives today, and where he created most of the images I'll show you. Pages, because that's the title Wally himself assigned to his more than 200 works inspired by Ovid. In the year 2017, Ovid donated 87 of his pages from Ovid to the New York University Art Collection. 2 years later, NYU's Gray Art Gallery presented an exhibition of some 50 of these. This is the catalog of the exhibition that you might have noticed at the front desk. Here, the table. And at that time, the Gray was still in its original home at Washington Square. Last year, with its move to a larger space at 18 Cooper Square, it was renamed the Gray Art Museum. Since 2019, Wally has periodically donated additional works, bringing the grand total at NYU to some 224 works and counting. When I talked with him on the phone the other day, he said he was at work on yet another Ovidian image. I'm greatly indebted to Matthew Santarocco, Dennis Geronimus, and Lynn Gumpert, who are co-authors of the exhibition catalog, and I highly recommend it to you for further study and enjoyment. You can download a free digital copy from the Gray's website. You can buy it at a print edition at the Gray's bookstore, and you can also find it online. Before I continue, I must extend heartfelt thanks to Wally Reinhardt himself, who is here with us today, not only for making the wonderful works of art you're about to see, but for all his generous support and advice. For their invaluable help with my talk, I'm also deeply indebted to Gray staff members Michelle Wong, who's here with us today, Lori Duke, and Allegra Favilla. Let's start off with Wally's image of Ovid crowned with immortality, which he made in 1990 using Prismacolor pencil and gouache. And gouache is an opaque form of watercolor. And he made it on Arches paper, which is a traditional fine art support. The sheet measures 11 inches high by 15 inches wide. Keep that in mind while you are looking at this much enlarged version of it. These media and dimensions are characteristic of the Ovidian works in Wally's first style. Now for a spot of background. Ovid was born in 20 BCE and lived during the reign of Emperor Augustus. His Metamorphoses is an epic poem recounting the lives and loves of the Greek gods and their interactions with mortals. It comprises 15 books and more than 250 myths, some familiar, others obscured, all reworked by Ovid. As Matthew Santarocco notes in the Gray's exhibition catalog, this extraordinary masterpiece stands alone in the corpus of world literature, unlike anything that came before or after. He points out that unlike Virgil's Aeneid, Ovid's poem lacks a historical subject, a unified time frame, a single continuous plot, or even one authorial voice. In their place, Ovid enthralls us with dazzling topical variety and stylistic virtuosity that feels strikingly modern. Since the 2,000 years that he wrote it, Ovid's Metamorphoses has never gone out of style, inspiring countless works of visual art, literature, opera, drama, dance, and cinema, and many more. Of these, the fine arts stand first and foremost. Scenes from the Metamorphoses are among the most frequently depicted in the history of Western art, spawning countless masterpieces by artists such as Botticelli, Michelangelo, Titian, Annibale Carracci, and Bernini, to name just a few. Now to introduce Wally Reinhardt. He was born in Washington Heights in 1935 and is still at age 90 actively making art. He never pursued formal art training, but recalls having loved to sketch at an early age, describing himself as the class artist when he was a kid. During the 1970s, Wally lived in Rome with his partner, the painter Robert Kaiser, who was then teaching at Temple University in their study abroad program. In Rome, Wally encountered a vast number of paintings, drawings, sculptures, and monuments inspired by Ovid's epic poem. But it was not until 1984, when he was 49 years old, that Wally turned to Ovid for his own subject matter. On an earlier visit to Florence, Wally had seen Botticelli's newly cleaned painting, The Birth of Venus, at the Uffizi Gallery. He thought it was, quote, one of the most beautiful paintings I had ever seen, end quote, and says, quote, it was so inspiring that it finally got me going and has sustained me. In Ovid, Wally found his true life's work. As far as he knows, Wally has produced more images derived from Ovid's Metamorphoses than any other artist in history. And thanks to his generous gifts, NYU's extensive archive of his pages now serves as an important learning tool for faculty, students, and visitors. Now let's turn our attention to the image on the screen. Wally's 1990 portrait of Ovid crowned with immortality, which shows the poet surrounded by male nudes trumpeting his fame. Posing in profile like some ancient cameo, Wally's Ovid is notably unmonumental. A genial, gray-haired, balding man covered with a circle of laurel leaves. He casts a mischievous sideways glance at us. His blue eyes are twinkling in amusement. His mouth curls up in a cheeky grin. As I mentioned, this is a relatively early work by Wally, made in his first style. Note the strong framing elements, which Wally says he adopted because he liked, quote, fitting my figures into something, end quote. Also typical are the mosaic-tiled surface patterns, the lettered caption, and the hint of amusement on Ovid's face. As Matthew Santaracco perceptively notes, Ovid's Metamorphoses resonates on many levels. Strikingly modern are its representation of the cosmos in perpetual flux, of individual identity as essentially unstable, of tension between divine power and human agency, and of human subtle challenge to authority. As we shall see, even as Wally engages deeply with this ancient text, he inserts numerous modern elements, making Ovid's timeless stories feel uncannily familiar to us, or incorporating such staples of our daily lives as comic books, subway tiles, lettered signs, and vivid cinematic mise-en-scène. Let's move on to Perseus and Medusa, an early set in Wally's pages. He made it in 1987, just 3 years after his first Ovidian works. On the screen, you see Perseus awaits his chance, the first of 3 images in the set. As usual, Wally incorporates the work's title in the form of a caption, referring us to Ovid's myth in Book 4. Born of the god Jupiter's coupling with the beautiful Danae, a mortal, Perseus is a demigod who is sent to capture the head of Medusa, a monstrous gorgon with snakes for hair that turns anyone who looks at her to stone. Like his Ovid crowned with immortality, Wally casts this work in his first early style. Note the internal frame, which here is enlivened with sparkling gold and with Medusa's snake hair spilling out over the wide border. Grayed out figures look on, some popping out of the corners like Jack-in-the-Box figures. These are Medusa's previous foes, whom she has turned to stone. Wally describes Medusa's face as shocking and repulsive, leading him to depict her as a Picasso-like cubist image, flattened and deformed, which he mischievously describes as, quote, the ugliest face I could think of. Clearly an insider joke for art-savvy folks. Peeking out from the lower left corner is rosy-cheeked Perseus himself, bearing his sword, eyebrows raised, lips spread in a puckish grin as he anticipates what's to come. In Wally's third image in this set, which don't have time to show you today, but is in the catalog, Perseus will outsmart Medusa and decapitate her, putting an end to her reign of terror. Perseus awaits his chance, is heavy and dense, bursting with saturated color. While Medusa's head is reduced to cubist lines and angles, the rest of her figure is vibrantly fleshy, her arms and breasts flattened to fit the internal frame. In deploying two clashing art styles in a single image, Wally infuses it with an art historical cacophony that echoes Medusa's terrifying effect on her viewers. 4 years later, Wally tackled Ovid's tale of Achilles and Cygnus from Book 12. On the screen, you see the work entitled The End of Troy. Cygnus was slain by Achilles and became a swan at once. Now Wally is clearly aiming to pack a greater visual punch. The composition is livelier, more ambitious, and more engaging. Figures overlap and break out of their internal frames, pushing aggressively out into the viewer's space. Looming large at the left, clad in starry patterned silver armor, is Achilles, the mightiest of all Greek warriors, shown grasping the neck of a swan in the act of crushing it to death. According to Ovid, to end the Trojan War, Achilles must kill Cygnus, who protects the city's shoreline and is a fierce enemy on the battlefield. But Achilles' spear finds no purchase against this enemy, whose immortal father, Neptune, king of the ocean, is far more powerful than Achilles. Finally, Achilles manages to grab Cygnus, throw him to the ground, and crush and strangle him. But as Achilles begins to strip away Cygnus' armor, he finds it empty. Neptune has turned his son into a swan that flies away. In Wally's version, Achilles reaches for the cord attached to Cygnus' helmet, intending to remove it from his head. Neptune appears in the lower right corner, trident in hand, in the act of transforming his son. He stands amid a lavish cascade of white swan's feathers sprouting from a stalk of flesh-colored matter that's in the process of withering away. Throughout Wally's pages, certain details strike humorous notes. Here, Cygnus' helmet appears toy-like, and even in the midst of his startling metamorphosis, he appears more amused than traumatized. Many of Ovid's tales deal with aspects of sexual desire. In Book 12, he recounts the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea. Pygmalion is a sculptor whose intense erotic longing for one of his creations, an ivory statue he names Galatea, transforms her into warm flesh and blood, and he makes love to her. Wally envisions the two lovers sheltered in their trysting place, a luxurious pavilion studded with jewel-like mosaics and lined with lush fabrics. He depicts Galatea as a reclining female nude, tracing her in bloodless outline, her pose and style echoing art history's iconic reclining female nudes. Wally's message is clear. Even in her pre-transformation state, Galatea is already a sex goddess. He signals this in her languid pose, her visible pubic hair, and the erotic play of her feet. In a strikingly bold move, Wally himself personifies Pygmalion in the form of a completely nude self-portrait with a full-blown erection. As Pygmalion, he clearly dotes on Galatea. He tucks his right arm between his shin and thigh to connect with her, and with his left hand, he fondles her tummy. Wally leaves us in no doubt as to just how strongly Pygmalion is turned on by the art-making process, by his ability to bring Galatea to life through his art. Graphic, unfettered eroticism is a recurring motif in Ovid's great epic poem, which no doubt helps to account for its lasting popularity. In depicting himself as Pygmalion, splendid male body, lusty erection and all, Wally certainly puts himself on the line. Indeed, our pleasure in viewing Wally's Ovidian scenes derives in part from the fact that so many of them are, like Ovid's own myths, undeniably, overtly, exuberantly sexy. By the turn of the millennium, we find Wally moving into his new second style. Let's examine his Orpheus and Eurydice from the year 2000. In this transitional work, Wally still uses the smaller sheets, but now he stacks two of them vertically to construct a single image. In place of his first style's dense, heavy frames within frames, mosaic-style backgrounds, and opaque washes, he now paints aqueous fields in indigo blue watercolor, the tincture of dreams. With these new strategies, Wally liberates his pages, moving towards an art more closely approaching Ovid's own captivating, dizzying descriptions of a world perpetually in flux. Many of you will already be familiar with this myth of Orpheus and Eurydice from Ovid's Book 10. It's one of his best-known tales and has already been mentioned today. Orpheus is the world's greatest musician and poet. He marries the lovely young Eurydice, but soon after the wedding, she's bitten by a snake and dies. Overcome with grief, he pleads with Pluto and Proserpina, rulers of the underworld, to allow him to bring his dead wife back to the world of the living. Enchanted by Orpheus's superb lyre playing and his lilting voice, they grant him permission on one condition, that he refrain from looking back at her until after she has completely emerged. But in the end, he's unable to resist, and to his great despair, she's forced to return to the underworld. To underscore the lovers' agonizing separation, Wally divides them between two sheets, with Orpheus on top, his feet bound to the earth by gravity, and Eurydice upside down, traipsing lightly through a flowering meadow. Here Wally monumentalizes the lovers' nude bodies, bending each into position to fit its frame, implying great energy contained. He casts red-haired Orpheus as an idealized young lover in the flower of his youth, his head turned aside in sorrow as he strums his lyre, while blonde Eurydice is a nubile maiden. Wally teases out the two figures' emotional lives down to the smallest details. For example, he hints at their yearning for each other in their cascading hair. Orpheus's hair flows down toward Eurydice, and hers up toward him, and their bare feet strain to touch each other's through the paper's unyielding divide. Our next scene, Theseus slays the Minotaur from 2003, is radically different in tone and form. In Book 8, Ovid recounts how Theseus, an Athenian hero, ends the cruel tribute of young people sent to Crete to be devoured by the Minotaur, the fearsome half-bull, half-man monster imprisoned in King Minos' labyrinth. When Theseus arrives as one of these sacrificial victims, Minos' daughter, Ariadne, falls in love with him. After he kills the monster, she leads him out of the maze with a trail of yarn. Now Wally has begun working on larger sheets characteristic of his second style, 18 inches high by 11 inches wide. Here he places two sheets side by side, showing the two warring opponents on the same ground plane. With a great centrifugal swing of his battle sword, Theseus lops off the monster's head, unleashing a torrent of blood that splashes down onto the beast's shoulders and chest, ending in a trickle that is caught on the fictive ledge of a grid line, another of Wally's many insider art jokes. Our eyes are momentarily distracted by the big, luscious splotch of red paint on paper, even as we know it signals the monster's bloody death. At the left, tied to one finger of Theseus' hand and trailing out of the picture, is the little string that Ariadne will use to guide him out of the deadly labyrinth. Here again, Wally tempers a scene of great violence with touches of humor. He flattens the picture space, organizing it in gridded boxes, and he articulates the narrative in flat, bright patches of color. Casting the Minotaur's head in the form of a giant blue mask, he veils the monster's response to his own bloody death. In all these ways, Wally's image calls to mind a page in a comic book. And in fact, the artist sometimes refers to his Ovidian images as comics, spelled C-O-M-I-X, alluding not only to the lowbrow pop culture medium of comic books, intended primarily for children, but also more specifically to the alternative tradition of comics with an X, which include graphic sexuality and violence and are aimed at adult audiences. And indeed, borrowing comics' pictorial strategies is yet another way that Wally strives to incorporate Ovid's tales into the flow of our contemporary life today. Wally finds Ovid's tale of Apollo and Daphne, which you see here in his image from 2005, especially poignant, and he has cited Gian Lorenzo Bernini's great 17th century sculpture of the subject as a source of inspiration. In Ovid's Book 1, after Apollo makes fun of Cupid's bow, calling it small and toy-like, the god of love retaliates by shooting two arrows, a golden one that makes Apollo fall head over heels in love, and a lead one that makes the object of his affections, the nymph Daphne, reject him. And that's indicated here by Wally, her rejection in the restraining hand that she places on Apollo's hip. Undaunted, Apollo pursues Daphne through her forest home. But when he finally catches her, her river god father saves her from ravishment, transforming her into a laurel tree. Note the puzzled expression on Apollo's face. As the epitome of male beauty, he's more used to being chased by women than the other way around. Daphne's face, on the other hand, signals her fury and disgust. Wally catches her at the moment of transformation, her feet literally rooting into the ground, her hair morphing into spiky green leaves, and her head and stomach sprouting branches. Wally built Apollo and Daphne using 3 separate sheets of paper arranged side by side, confining the main action to the central sheet. At either side is an expansive landscape dotted with cavorting rabbits, which are ancient symbols of fertility due to their prolific breeding habits. Surrounded by cliffs evoking a Greek island set in the Mediterranean Sea, the landscape tilts sharply upward as if seen from a bird's eye view, Its dizzying instability brackets the disorienting metamorphosis taking place in the center panel. Here, Wally moves away from the flat patches of color we saw in Theseus and the Minotaur. He sets an entire landscape in glorious motion, applying transparent watercolor in undulating washes. First, he painted a blue underlayer, still visible here in the star-studded night sky. Then he brushed it over with a wet wash of yellow to suggest grassy green hills. At the bottom, using the very tip of his brush, Wally dabbed the white paper with delicate touches of blue to indicate rippling seawater, while enlisting the white of the paper to evoke moonlight reflections. All in all, a most magical and captivating image. I'll end my talk with one of the grandest works in Wally's entire Ovid series, which also happens to be one of my personal favorites. Entitled Bacchus Double Toast, and dating from 2002, finished in 2014, it's composed of 6 sheets of paper, each 11 by 8 inches, arranged 3 across, and then stacked in 2 rows to make a spacious, near-square composition measuring 36 by 33 inches. Within this arena, Wally lets loose the free play of his imagination, now conjuring up an Ovidian world spinning in motion. Here, Wally conflates 2 of Ovid's separate but interrelated tales from books 3 and 8. In book 3, the poet tells how Bacchus, the god of winemaking, fertility, and religious ecstasy, now transformed into a beautiful young boy, is kidnapped from the island of Chios by a group of passing sailors. Their leader, Acoides, notices that the boy is oddly feminine and walks as if drunk on wine. And he concludes that this is not a mere mortal child. On board ship, the boy asks the sailors to take him to his home island of Naxos. They promise to do so, but when the boy sees that they are sailing in the wrong direction, he reveals himself as the god Bacchus and stops the ship in a dead halt. At the left, Wally depicts Bacchus on dry land following his revelation, in the resplendent body of a classic male nude with long, curly blonde hair. This Bacchus is a 2-fisted drinker holding up 2 modern stemmed wine glasses filled with red wine, one in each hand. To mock his former captors, he wears a sailor's hat. Far below, seen from a precipitous viewpoint that leaves us gasping for breath, the sailors scramble around on their ship, which rocks violently in the roiling sea. Dominating the center of Wally's composition is the ship's enormous red sail, which flaps wildly amid stormy gusts of wind and is bound to a mast careening on the diagonal. To arrest the ship's progress, Bacchus is enshrouding it in magical golden vines that grow all the way to the top of its mast. He punishes the sailors for lying to him by turning them into dolphins. Wally shows the sailors on board ship in mid-transformation. Some sprout dolphins' heads and others' tails. Yet more sailors, already fully changed into dolphins but still wearing their sailors' caps, frolic in the choppy waves. One sailor turned dolphin, poking his head up near Bacchus, attempts to placate the god by offering him a fish, but to no avail. And that's a detail straight out of Ovid. As noted in Wally's caption at the bottom, the work also includes, at the top right, the figure of Ariadne, who, as you will recall, fell in love with Theseus and, using a piece of yarn, led him out of the Minotaur's labyrinth. Taking Ariadne with him, Theseus then sailed to the island of Naxos, where he cruelly abandoned her. In Book 8, Ovid tells how she was rescued by Bacchus, who became her lover and transformed her into a constellation. Wally inserts Ariadne's nude body, pregnant with Theseus's child, at the upper left corner, soaring high up into the sky. Crowned with Bacchus's golden diadem, she floats among the stars, while, in the words of Wally's caption, quote, specters of wild beasts populate the sky. And that too comes right out of Ovid. In Wally's hands, these cartoon-like creatures represent the night sky constellations by which ancient sailors navigated. Both fearsome and humorous, they tumble over each other in a great tumult, their blood-red eyes belied by their toothy smiles. Over the course of my talk, I've given you a tiny glimpse into Wally Reinhardt's large corpus illustrating Ovid's great compendium. Wally likes to insist that whatever merit is found in this work must be attributed to Ovid, his great master and treasured source. At the end of the Metamorphoses, Ovid himself proclaims, I shall be read, and through all centuries, and now I'm quoting, if prophecies of bards are ever truthful, I shall be living always. As we now know, Ovid's boast came true. Yet great works become immortal only when they're taken up and renewed, that is, subjected to constant transformation and change by each succeeding generation, not only through direct reading, translations, and new interpretations of the text, but also through transmutation into other media, such as fine arts, literature, opera, dance, and cinema, to name a few. Art forms that not only draw directly from Ovid, but also cross-pollinate. As a great theater goer, Wally adores opera and ballet, which he calls, quote, marvelous visual spectacles. He especially loves Georges Balanchine's choreography for New York City Ballet. Wally started attending City Ballet's performances at City Center on West 56th Street. And in 1964, he followed the troupe to their current home at Lincoln Center. As Wally has said, quote, Balanchine was a big influence on the way I think of the figure and sometimes bend it because his dancers could do anything, end quote. In the following talk, Jennifer Homans will talk about Balanchine's Agon. I can't wait to hear it. In conclusion, I will paraphrase Lynn Gumpert's words in the Gray's exhibition catalog. Wally's pages not only tempt us to revisit Ovid's narrative, they entice us to dive ever more deeply into it. In this regard, Wally's pages from Ovid's Metamorphoses are a rip-roaring success. They deserve widespread, lasting recognition, not only as unique and fascinating interpretations of Ovid, but as marvelous works of art in their own right. Thank you.